Allô? Should we start? Okay, so I think that we'll start this new panel. So I'm thrilled to be moderating this panel that is hosted on the Science for Climate Action Pavilion. So this pavilion is co-organized by the IPCC, WMO, Fundación Cortes Solari, and MERI Foundation, as well as Université Côte d'Azur. The topic of today will be about effective conservation in the 21st century. And we'll be speaking a little bit more about multidimensional challenges and solutions from the Global South and beyond. I think it's no secret that conservation today sits at the crossroad of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. And the pressure on our ecosystem has never been greater. That being said, the good news is that across the world, bold and innovation models are reshaping how we protect nature, from community-led actions to large-scale restorations. This panel will invite us to dive into these experiences, confront the major challenges ahead, and explore how they can drive global ambitions like the 30 by 30 and the Paris Agreement. To do so, we've decided to divide the conversation in three main sequences. The first one will be about global challenges to effective conservation. We'll be identifying the structural barriers that hinder effective conservation in the Global South and more globally. The second part will be about territorial models and innovation from the Global South, and we'll showcase concrete stories, replicable models from Chile, Brazil, but also beyond. And finally, the third sequence will be about ocean culture and biodiversity. And we'll be talking a little bit more about integrated approaches to explore advances in marine and terrestrial conservation, science and its interaction with culture, livelihoods, and biodiversity. So for the first part, I'm very happy to be introducing Dr. Sandeep Sengbutta. So he is currently the IUCN Global Policy Lead for climate change, but he has a very extensive career at the frontier between science and policy, so welcome. And we will also have the pleasure of having Francisca Cortes Solari, who is the executive president of the philanthropy Cortes Solari and the foundation MERI, who has been working and dedicating their expertise and their time to the conservation of many areas, including especially in Chile. I'm very happy to welcome you both on this important topic. My first question will actually be for you. And we're going to talk a little bit about the sad part of the story, I would say. And my question is the following. What are the primary governance failures preventing conservation from being truly effective today?
Thank you. So first of all, let me begin by thanking you, thanking all the co-organizers, and in particular, thanking you, Francesca, for all your leadership and support, not only in convening us here today, but also as the IUCN patron of nature. We really appreciate your support. As you know, we meet at a very pivotal time in this conversation. And if you ask me, what are the primary failures that are stopping us from moving ahead, I would characterize it perhaps as three gaps. First, we are facing an ambition gap. Second, we are facing an implementation gap. And third, we are facing a financing and a capacity building gap. So if I just quickly unpack each of these in the context of also where we are today, in terms of the ambition gap, we know that, emissions need to be reduced by around 60% by 2035 to keep us within the 1.5-degree target. Yet, if we look at all the NDCs that have been submitted up to date, those would take us to only around a 10% reduction by that timeline. And clearly there has been insufficient ambition in terms of countries putting forward their NDCs. Secondly, even if we look at, and I'm moving here to the implementation gap, even if we look at the 2030 NDCs that have been submitted by countries, 5 years back, there has not been sufficient implementation of them. So there's a real gap between the commitments that countries make and the measures they take to actually implement those commitments. And which is why it is also very heartening in a sense, if you look at the ICJ advisory opinion that came out recently, that really urged countries to bridge this implementation gap, to put in place enforcement mechanisms to achieve this. And from our side in IUCN, we are also urging parties not only to submit more ambitious NDCs, but to embed those NDCs within national law. And the third gap is what I mentioned, the financing gap. We know that, the financing that is required for nature needs to be at least 3 times larger than what it is currently to meet the goals of all the 3 Rio conventions. And, these, I think, would be the main the governance gaps that are stopping us from advancing where we are on both nature and on climate. And the nature climate link is very deeply interlinked. We had the IUCN Congress in Abu Dhabi just last month, right? And there were 2 studies that were launched. So one was the World Heritage Outlook, which showed that over 40% of all natural World Heritage sites are being threatened by climate change. And if you look even at the red list update of species, it shows that Arctic seals are threatened by climate change. Last year at COP29 in Baku, we found a red list update shows that about 40% of warm water coral species are being threatened with extinction. So this interlinkage between climate and biodiversity is very close, and it really needs ambition on the climate side and on the biodiversity side to put us on the right track. Thank you. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much. Maybe as a follow-up question, and that might be in the implementation section, but how do you believe we can work on a global framework when we know that national contexts are as diverse?
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good question. One of the conversations that is happening at this COP is the recognition that there needs to be closer synergies across all the 3 Rio conventions. And you are right, the national context in especially in the global south is very different in across the countries, right? So I would suggest 2 practical things. One is that at the national level, it is very important that countries align their national instruments. So the NDCs must be aligned with what they put in NAPS, the National Adaptation Plan should be aligned with what they put in their NBSAPs under the CBD, which should be aligned with what they have under their land degradation neutrality targets under the CCD process. So there is commonality across all the national instruments at the national level. The second thing I would say that in many countries, the focal points are different. The focal point for CBD is different from the focal point of the UNFCCC and the CCD, and they don't often speak to each other. So even if you can get them to speak to each other and align at the national level, that would be very helpful. But a signal from here, from the global level, is also very important to build these synergies and help some of these difficulties to be resolved.
Yes, energy is always a tricky question. Turning to Francesca, primero, una cosa, le agradeció mucho al doctor Sengupa para su acción en COP, pero también para su acción día a día y también por ser patrón de Natures, que Francesca es la única, creo, de Latinoamérica. Así que eso también es algo muy fuerte. Una pregunta muy simple. ¿Cuál sería el modelo de conservación que ha desarrollado la Fundación Cortés Solari hasta ahora?
En Chile. Aló, muchas gracias. Pati me va a traducir. Gracias. Bueno, primero que nada, destacar que vengo desde Chile, del sur del mundo, y creo que es importante recalcar de que en Chile igual existen varias iniciativas que son súper poderosas en cuanto a conservación.
So first of all, I want to mention that I came from Chile, a very far country from here. And in our country, we have several initiatives related to conservation.
Lo que nosotros hemos hecho desde Fundación MERI, desde Filantropía Cortés Solari, adquirimos 3 territorios en 3 latitudes distintas de Chile.
So what we did from Philanthropy Cortesolari and MERI Foundation is get 3 parks in different latitudes in Chile.
Y en estos 22, 23 años que tenemos estas reservas,
And in those 22, 23 years that we have those reservas,
hemos tenido que aplicar para tener un orden, una gobernanza. Y esa gobernanza desemboca en anticipar o crear o implementar un modelo.
so we have developed a governance that allow us to anticipate, develop, and create a model.
Esa fue la forma que nosotros encontramos para poder hacer una conservación que fuera efectiva y que realmente tuviera líneas de acción concretas.
So this is the way we find to really develop a model that allow us to deploy effective lines and concrete actions.
Por ejemplo, trabajamos de una forma circular. Por ejemplo, hablamos del primer nivel que abordamos en la reserva, que tiene que ver con el territorio, con las dinámicas territoriales, con la ciencia y con todo lo que tenga que ver con el abordaje territorial y la ciencia, precisamente.
So we work around different dimensions, and the first one is related to science in particular.
Finalmente, la ciencia y el territorio nos distingue cuáles son las problemáticas y cuáles son los objetos de conservación desde el territorio.
So the science allows us to define the species under threat in each territory.
No es lo mismo conservar en el desierto de Atacama que conservar en la Patagonia.
It's not the same to do
Chile.
conservation in the north of Chile, in the Atacama Desert, or in the northern Patagonia in the south of Chile.
Entonces, una vez que revisamos todo lo que tenga que ver con el territorio, la ciencia y todo lo que tiene que ver con esas dinámicas territoriales, de ahí nos preocupamos de que todo este material pueda ser llevado hacia las escuelas, hacia los colegios, hacia la sociedad civil.
So as soon as we finish the scientific studies on the territory, we develop programs to work with the community in
Y
education.
de muchas formas, porque al final tiene que ver cómo comunicamos, cuáles son las formas, obviamente desarrollando material educativo respecto a cada una de las latitudes,
And obviously, there is several ways to do this because the important thing is to communicate, but obviously there is different way to do so.
no solo eso, sino también cómo conservamos no solamente el territorio, sino también, que es el otro pilar que nosotros trabajamos, la cultura.
And the challenge is to explain how to conserve not only the territory, but also the culture.
La cultura también distingue el territorio, por lo tanto nosotros cuando conservamos decimos que conservamos no solamente el territorio, sino también la cultura, que es lo que no vemos, que es lo inmaterial, pero que es fundamental a la hora de conservar.
So each territory has its own culture and its own particularity, and this is why when we work around a culture and territory, and when we do conservation, we do not only conserve the species but also the culture.
Y por último, creo que es un desafío que tenemos hoy en día como humanidad, como planeta, es cómo existen más áreas de conservación en el mundo, ya sea terrestre o marina, porque sabemos que eso es lo que va a resguardar finalmente parte de lo natural o de lo elemental, diría yo, de la semilla.
And obviously, one of the main challenges is to grow up the marine protected area, but also the terrestrial protected area. And we need to keep the seeds.
Y ahí es donde viene cómo nos hacemos cargo de la parte económica, de la sostenibilidad del territorio, cómo nos hacemos cargo de sostener la operación del territorio y no solamente hacer una conservación que sea una conservación como cerrada, sino nuestro desafío básicamente es que nuestras reservas son en realidad laboratorios naturales donde se hace educación, conservación, arte, etc.
And the other dimension is the economical one. What do we do to ensure that the reserve, the park, are sustainable from an economical perspective? So at the end of the day, through this model of conservation, we do science, we do education, but we also try to develop economical models in order to ensure that they are sustainable.
Tomando estos 4 ejes, ahí es donde nosotros realmente podemos ver cómo estamos aplicando el modelo en cada uno de los territorios y finalmente dónde tenemos que trabajar un poco más o dónde tenemos que cambiar tal vez un poco más el discurso.
So those four dimensions, scientists, social with education, economical and cultural, allow us to understand if in one land we need to develop one dimension or another dimension. It's depend obviously because each
Es una
territory is
brújula.
different.
Es una brújula finalmente. Brújula.
Huh?
A compass?
Yes, it's a compass.
Compass. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so maybe coming back to you, Dr. Sandeep, Francesca was mentioning about circularity in the model to have a holistic approach that creates a virtuous cycle where transmission is always used and reused and disseminated. How would you say that resonates with the work that has been carried out by the IUCN?
Gracias. So thank you. So first of all, I just want to thank her for those wonderful remarks.
Muchas gracias por
Muchas
esas
gracias.
palabras.
Muchas gracias. I think it resonates very strongly. I mean, the dimensions that she outlined are exactly, in a sense, the mindset change that needs to happen if we are to succeed in addressing the conservation challenge on the ground over the long term. You cannot do it with science alone. You cannot do it with, you cannot do it with governments alone. You need to have local people on the ground. You need to respect indigenous territories. You need to have cultural change. So I think the 4 points that she highlighted as parts of, the corners of the compass, I think if followed can really help us push in the right direction. Now, the same thing is often said in different things in different places, but the underlying ideas are, I think, really important to maintain and strengthen and to communicate it more widely, because not many people necessarily understand and follow this framework fully.
Thank you very much. I think that we can actually finish with this first part. Thank you very much to both speakers. And so we spoke about the main challenges in the development of these new models. We then have an example of a model that has been successful. I would like now to call on our next speakers who will actually give and provide specific examples coming from their experience. So I will be calling, I think that, yes, Carolina Morgado, who is online. She is the executive director of the Fundación Rewild Chile. We also have Jaina de Araujo, who is a biodiversity conservation specialist at the Botacario Group Foundation for Nature Protection. Dr. Lahis Faroni Perez, who is the secretary, who will be here as the secretariat of the Belmont Forum. And last but not least, Munia Mustafaou from Acclimat Terra representatives. So you can please have a seat. Thank you very much. As I mentioned in my introduction, the idea here is really to have some specific examples of what you have been carrying out in different places of the world, Brazil, Chile, and other places. My first question, and I hope we're going to do a sound test, so I hope I see that you can hear us. I hope that we'll be able to hear you. So my first question will go to Carolina. And it would be, what does large-scale restoration in Patagonia teach us about long-term territorial stewardship in the experiments that you have been carrying out in Chile?
Yes, hello to everybody. Thank you, Matt, very much for this
I cannot hear you. I'm sorry.
You cannot hear
Let's
me?
try again.
Do you hear me now? Do you hear me?
So it seems that online you are heard, which means that it comes from us on our side.
Okay. 1, 2,
So
3.
would you agree, maybe, Caroline, stay with us? I will maybe ask my questions to Jaina, and then we'll come back to you hoping that the sound system will work again.
Sure.
So going back to Brazil now, can you tell us a little bit about the work that has been carried out, and especially how the funding mechanisms that have been deployed in Brazil have supported these conservation models that you have been working on?
Thank you so much for the question, and thanks for having me here for the invitation. It's an honor to be here representing Brazil in this section. And in Boticário Foundation, we've been working with nature conservation for over 35 years. Actually, this year is our 35th anniversary. And since then, we believe that nature is the basis and the solution for the main challenges we face now in the world. That said, we've been working a lot with the nature-based solution strategies to fight the climate change. And as we have a long experience in supporting projects, and we have calls and support scientific projects, we've been evolving this way of supporting initiatives. Instead of supporting only scientific projects, we support solutions, practical solutions at the end of in the ground. So for that, you can't do that alone. As you said before, we have to do that with many different peoples and sectors. So it's a multi-stakeholder strategy. We gather with the government, with other NGOs, with philanthropy, with development banks, investors, as well as decision makers and people that are on the ground, the community, the traditional, to build together a project, a solution for that, for some impacts. And bring you one example. The last call we had, it's we call that the incubator, NBS incubator. So it was a call together with partners, and for the municipalities to send us projects to include NBS in their projects in their cities. But for that, always talking to the people, to the municipalities, they always say, we don't have money. We don't have who invest on these projects. On the other side, talking to investors and to the development banks, they always said, okay, we have money, but we don't have good projects to support. And okay, we had this gap. And then we put together this both actors, both stakeholders, and then we made a capacity building with the cities so they could learn about NBS, they could learn how to write these projects. And on the other hand, we talked to the developments and the investors so they could learn about NBS and they could learn the importance of supporting this kind of projects so they could invest even more on that. So with this call, we had more than 100 cities, they sent projects to us, and now we have 30 cities that are going through capacity building projects. And last week, we had a table of investors. Then we put together all the cities. We had the mayors talking about their projects, giving a pitch about their projects, and have a table of investors, many different banks and kinds of investors to see those projects, and then giving their feedbacks to the projects to get even better so they can invest on these projects. So that's one example of how putting together and how it's important to invest on capacity building, invest in communication as well, and listening to the people, listening to the stakeholders that are involved in this, because we don't have the solution alone, but you can really work on that glue of articulating these different stakeholders.
Thank you very much. Indeed, what I will keep in mind is this idea of two-way transfer as well, between the different stakeholders and what they can bring to each other, and the capacity that you had to create the right meeting and the right conditions in order for these different stakeholders to be able to work together. Thank you. I might have a follow-up question a little bit later on, but it seems that now the sound system is working. So let's have it a go. Carolina, my question was about the model that has been developed by your foundation and how you have been working within the communities in Chile in the different conservation projects that have been supported. I hope we can hear you now.
Yes, do you hear me?
Perfect.
Perfect. Okay, thank you so much. Hello to everybody. Well, as you know, the model we have been working in Chile since 1992. We have been buying big extensions of land to help the national government create national parks. So we have based our primary strategy to counteract climate change and biodiversity crisis, big scale conservation. And why big scale is because all the ecological process really happen at a big scale level. The other thing is that our projects have always considered fundamental three aspects. One is to work on parks, as I was saying. Then we always ask ourselves who is missing in these territories, and therefore what we work for is to achieve complete ecosystems. And of course, we work kind of like in a trident. All of this is the communities. Our work with communities is fundamental, and they are being involved through workers, through high-end workers as monitors of the wildlife programs, but also through environmental education, so they are connected to their natural patrimony, but also through conservation tourism, which we have found it's an essential alternative that we can show communities to all the extractive economy that goes on in Chile. But our work so far at this point, we have helped create already 7 national parks in Chile. We are in the process of creating number 8. We have donated a total of 620,000 acres to the Chilean state, protected 11 million acres, because with our donation, we always trigger public-private collaboration. Therefore, when we propose to make a national park, we donate land, but we also ask the government that public land that is adjacent to the land that we have bought is included in this national park, and that is why so far we have been able to protect 11 million acres. Another aspect that I think is fundamental, all of our work, we see long-term conservation on the public hands, and therefore we focus all of our work as a local collaboration with the national plans for conservation and for protection. And the other thing is that we see fundamental, although we have not been able to make so far a marine park, we see fundamental integrating ocean protection to land protection, and that we all know is totally inseparable. And we do use science. Science gives credibility, but also a very important, the basis for to find the objectives of these donations that we are proposing. Science also is very important when it comes to influence in policies. So that is how we work in Chile, in Rewild in Chile, which is the legacy organization of Tompkins Conservation, to achieve these complete ecosystems.
Thank you. We see that this idea of territory, whereas it is a park or a city, actually allows also to include this holistic approach and have these conversation with diverse actors. Thank you so much. Going to a third example now with Dr. Laris Faroni Perez, representing the Belmont Foundation. I know that the Belmont has been very specific on how to support interdisciplinary research in order to achieve this holistic approach when it comes to conservation. And the last calls that have been carried out by the Belmont are quite illustrative of that. So maybe you want to tell us a little bit more.
Thank you. And first of all, thank you for the invitation for Fundação MERI and all the other partners. It's such an honor to be here in this high-level event and with such colleagues and panelists as well. In the Belmont Forum, what we do across the collaborative research action, for us, the transdisciplinarity means when the actors are involved since the beginning. The actors is the ones that has been talking by Sundeep, also Francesca, Janaína, Carolina also mentioned, when is local communities, territorialism is engaged since the beginning, but also with social scientists, natural scientists, and non-academic actors that could be governments and so on. And for us, the transdisciplinary, it is only truly when it occurs since the beginning, since the co-design, but also on the co-implementation, and also when all the partners can be part of the benefit of the solution and also the outcomes as well. And so for us, the most promising approach combine socio-ecological system science, and that is to capture integration on biodiversity, climate, and also society and human well-being. But another point that I just mentioned is the transdisciplinarity for the co-production of the solutions. But the two other point is integrated knowledge frameworks, where the scientific, cultural, local knowledge, they can inform policies and decisions. And it has been also mentioned here. So what we do is not only local, but we bring community together all around the world, because our projects are beyond transdisciplinarity, but also multilateral. We will engage at least 3 countries in any of our calls. And as has been mentioned, another point is when we develop science that can be not only informing policy, but also integrated with the 3 Rio conventions, but also with BBNJ and so on. How can we connect the projects that are making real world solutions, but also helping the countries to report on under the national plans? So I will stop here.
I love what you're saying, and I think that it also actually reflects on some of the things that has already been said, that science is not just about informing, it's part of the solution, if included in the right manner. And I believe that our next speaker, actually, Munia Mosfari from Clima Terra, will maybe be talking a little bit more about that, and especially about how scientific gap can be addressed to ensure that these conservation strategy can be carried out.
Thank you to all. Thank you very much. I will stand up to change a bit. So I really thank the Philanthropic Altesse, La MERI Foundation. Thank you so much for this invite. Thanks everybody for being here. Thanks to the co-panelists. It's very good to be with you and to learn with you. And I would like please to say a word about Acclimatera, which is actually an initiative from the French Aquitaine, New Aquitaine actually region. It's an initiative that's whose president and co-creator is Professor Hervé Le Treut, who says hello to everybody. He couldn't make it today, but he's following us online. From the French Academy of Science, and he was also very much involved with the IPCC. So this initiative, this regional scientific initiative, was created actually in 2019. Oh, and by the way, we just published a book on the scientific part of the climate problem. But if we can go to next slide. In the last chapter that I had the honor to give to our president Francisca Cortés Solari from the Solari Foundation, we speak about from global to local climate features. Because if we can go maybe to next slide, we identified that a big problem in the science, and I will develop that at another slide, is that everybody knows, almost here, maybe everybody knows the global climate models that are big climate models, and we want to stay below or well below 2 degrees Celsius at the end of this century. Okay. But now what can we do at the regional scale? Hervé Le Treut and the president of the region New Aquitaine in 2019 had those goals to spotlight scientific reports from local researchers for local regions, not only for what's going to happen in France, for what's going to happen to the world, but in order to interest the local people, who are also citizens, who vote, etc., to tell them what's going to happen concretely, practically in their land, in their regions. So that was actually the idea of having a local IPCC. It's organized as the global IPCC, but at the local scale. It's interdisciplinary. It's very important. What you said really resonates with me, and also the cultural aspect maybe really need to be reinforced, as mentioned by Francisca, because it's not only land, it's not only life, it's also culture, arts. So, and the idea is to share this science for local scale towards elected officials, towards citizens, school, educators, etc. The media, very important. It's a cup of truth where disinformation has to be fought. And of course, raising the awareness of young people to prepare the future. Thank you. We can go to next slide, please. All that, of course, interact together. Okay, we can go to next slide. Okay, a bit of history you can develop, so just the map of the New Aquitaine region, because far away in Brazil, maybe everybody knows the Bordeaux wine, right? So that's the region of the Bordeaux wine. It's the largest French region. It's the fourth region in France in terms of population, the third French economical region with a strong activity for tourism, and 720 kilometers of Atlantic coast. These are the features of this region, well known for Bordeaux wine once again, and it's the first French agricultural region. Important also because, there was the yellow jacket crisis a few years ago. It was not the agriculture, but recently we also had a crisis with our agricultures who felt left away by this, and it's important that everybody gets involved. So just to go to the science, and sorry for that, just a word again on the global climate models that everybody knows for what's happening at the global scale. With Acclimatera, we use what we called regional climate models. It's actually a downscaling of the global models because we want to know what are going to be the effects in our region, for instance, in close to Bordeaux, of a +2 Celsius warming. Even in the best case scenario, indeed, the local effects are different from the global climate models, and they are what we call subgrid phenomena, like complex topography, when you have mountains, for instance, coastlines, that we cannot model in the big climate models. So we need to have different regional models that are constrained in the limits, that are more precise. We can go to next slide, please. So just to say a word about the different scenarios, you know that there are more or less optimistic or pessimistic scenario depending on how much greenhouse gases emission we make. Even in the best case scenario, and we can go to next slide, please. If we focus, for instance, on New Aquitaine region, but it could be also in Brazil, it could be in Africa, in any region that we choose to focus on. In the case of New Aquitaine, if we are in a best scenario, +2 degrees Celsius, it will be actually a +2.5 Celsius scenario, because it depends. It's a global mean, but regionally there are differences. So this is what we do, and what we show to the officials, the elected official, to show them the concrete effects of local policies in terms of science. So you see here we model the temperature change, precipitation change, so we can deliver like more precise risks. For instance, in this region, okay, there's an increased risk for agriculture, and a risk that is already amplified by, of course, temperature increase. But for other, depending on winter or summer, there are less risks. So it allows us to be more precise, and we can go to okay, in any case, for New Aquitaine region, even in the best case scenario, we will go beyond +2 Celsius, because regionally it's different than globally. And anyway, adaptation measures must be taken. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So we also have indicators of where we are today. For instance, in the New Aquitaine region, we are at +1.4 degrees Celsius right now already, and at plus for air temperature, and at +2 to 3 degrees for water temperature. So in terms of biodiversity, locally, that have very practical effects: displacements of species, isolation of populations, the decrease of the genetical biodiversity, and the modification of life cycles. Maybe you have heard of the forest fires that we had this year and also 3 years ago in the Bordeaux-Aquitaine region. If we can go to next slide, just to give an order of magnitude, it's a lot, okay? It's 30,000 hectares of forest that was burned in terms of surface, but it's 1,000 times less than the Amazon forest, just to give an order of magnitude. We can go to next slide, please. Okay, we identified 7 main challenges to tackle biodiversity that are listed here and that you already speak about, so I'm not going to repeat. We can go to next slide, because the idea, and okay, what we want to do now is to build up partnerships with other regions, because the idea would be to duplicate the Acclimatera regional initiative of local IPCC with other regions in the world. That would be great to cooperate together and to exchange, good practices, maybe. So we actually do reports like the IPCC, the global IPCC, every 5 years, etc. And those reports we can go fast. So in 2018, for instance, there were 240 contributors. Just to say that it's super interdisciplinary. You can see all the items that were actually assessed, very different, also including environmental health, mountain ranges, like very local things, in order to interest the local citizen, like very, very local thing, like the Valley of Osso. Okay, so we can talk to the mayor, etc. And just we can go further. The idea would be to duplicate, if some people are interested, this kind of initiative in Latin America, but also in Africa. For instance, I made my PhD over the greenhouse gas emissions of Africa, and it's not very much assessed. So I think we would be highly happy and honored to collaborate with other countries to talk about this. Thank you. Sorry, I was long.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Again, it seems that really the territory is at the heart of it, and that the local approach leading to larger scale approaches is also something that has produced very positive effects. Thank you very much. We will go to a last round of questioning at the end of the panel, but for now, I think that we will go to the third block of the panel. All about exploring advances in marine and terrestrial conservation. And for that, we have 2 colleagues online, I think, and 1 colleague that will be in the room. Online, we have Alejandro Pérez Matus, who is a marine ecologist at the University Católica de Chile. And we also have Eduardo Acosta Solis de Obando, who is a faculty member at the University of Cologne. I hope I'm not mistaken. And on the panel, if she wants to come, we have Cécile Saboureau, who is a professor of marine biology at Université Côte d'Azur. So my first question will actually be for Alejandro. And so you have been studying ecosystem of the South Pacific in order to analyze the climate impacts and the conservation needs. My question would be, can you tell us a little bit about what has been the conclusion of these first analysis and how it has helped maybe apply to some conservation models within the area of study? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me well?
Perfectly, yes, thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you for the invitation, and I would like to be there. But anyway, I am a specialist in temperate and semi-tropical subtidal environments, reaching mainly to mesophotic reef, which are those reef that occurs beyond 30 meters to 100 meters, and cover 60% of the reef of the world's ecosystem in general. And they are very underrepresented. Most of the research or ecological research is conducted between the first meters of depth. So in that sense, my work tries to integrate the impact of climate change and natural variability, environmental variability, and also human impact to understand the kelp forest ecology, which is kelp is a very important ecosystem of the temperate reef, mesophotic reef biodiversity, and also I try to integrate the fish movement to inform management and conservation. So in those three main lines, I aim in also to explore those reef that occurs beyond the limits of the conventional limits of diving. And we do that because they are very important for three main reasons. One is they may represent refuge of climate threats because most of the environmental variability, such as marine heat waves and Niño frequency occurs, and the impact is in the shallow environments from 0 to 100 to 20 meters. So we think those mesophotic reef may represent a refuge or the future reef of the future. Also because they are prone to increasing the oxygenation of the ocean, which is very important and something we are tending to overlook because we don't feel it. The lack of oxygen, we feel more the change in temperature, but we don't feel much the lack of oxygen, and this is a threat that is overcoming adaptations of many species. And the last thing is because most of the fisheries that operate today occur in those mesophotic environments. So we aim to understand if those are represented refugia for mesophotic environments and shallow threats, and we're trying to align this to inform conservation and also align with management in particular. So those are the things that we are working at the moment. So but we need to improve in that sense, monitoring and the climate change. We need to redesign some programs around climate drivers, and not just as a species list, but to integrate the functional component, how these functional components is related with those reefs that are being compromised. So that's basically what I do at the moment.
Thank you very much. So you mentioned a lot of how you use the information that you gather in order to inform those that eventually will make the decisions, including in this perspective of MPAs. Turning to you, Eduardo, now on how can communities and local knowledge system actually being included in that conversation, and how do they support actually the outcomes of the decision-making process once these data have been gathered and shared?
Hi everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation. I come in representation of Gian Andino from Chile. I'm a biotechnologist from Antofagasta, and I did my PhD in the University of Cologne. So answering the question, I think it's very important to understand that local and indigenous communities have been there in the ecosystems, for example, in the Atacama Desert for generations, in close relation with these ecosystems, and they know actually the microbial habitats, and they are often there knowing about the changes, and that information is important for conservation frameworks. So for example, their observations on the water, the climate, the soil, and the biological responses, they give a cue on how we can improve our metadata from the ecosystems into high resolution environmental information. And that really complements our scientific data sets. Having this said, integrating modern tools, for example, environmental DNA, metagenomics, and remote sensing, with that we gain much more complete picture of the ecosystem health, especially in these highly endangered ecosystems in the presence of climate change. And of course, we need to take in account the microbes that are underpinning all the biogeochemical cycles, driving nutrients, stabilizing soil, and supporting the resilience of larger organisms. So overall, it's very important that we work all together with the local communities to strengthen our conservation efforts.
Thank you very much for that. And to pointing out actually the importance of including, again, this approach for questions also of credibility and of how people are going to use what the work that has been carried out by you and other scientists. Turning to Cécile Saboureau now, so we were talking about environmental DNA, we were talking about new techniques on how can we continue to work on these conservation models and liaise, of course, with the decision-making process. What would be your thoughts about that and your experience?
Thank you so much for the invitation. So I would like to come back also to the monitoring. Because when we talk about monitoring, we need to think about the improvement of data acquisition, encouraging all kind of data. So we were talking about scientific data, of course, but also, for example, environmental DNA or data acquired by artificial intelligence. But that means also that we need to support also communities, researchers, and government in collecting high-quality, long-term data sets that reflects local realities. And that's very, very important because we need to improve both spatial and temporal resolution. Therefore, we need to foster co-creation processes, including indigenous environmental knowledge, community-based observations, and traditional practices. For example, we were talking about marine protected areas, and we need also to include the knowledge of small-scale fishermen and fisherwomen, of course. So that means that we need to integrate these with formal scientific models and create tools that are both more accurate and more culturally grounded. And this will be my second point. This is related to equity. We need also to link ecological indicators to socio-economic and equity outcomes, because we were talking about effectiveness of marine protected areas, but this effectiveness includes benefits to coastal communities. That means, for example, livelihood security or cultural values, and fair distribution and conservation costs. And for that, we need to monitoring frameworks that require reporting on this social dimension alongside ecological ones. So that means that we need also social science. So in conclusion, we need to adapt the frameworks to track ecological impact, but also management, performance, technological data streams, of course, but social equity. And so all this kind of data will give a clearer picture of whether global marine conservation or other kind of conservation is truly delivering outcomes and not just expanding the coverage of monitoring.
Thank you very much. And actually now I'm going to ask all the panelists the same question. And so I'm sure that we will get very diverse answers. Maybe only if they can reflect on, I would say, one common indicator or one common thought that you all had is that not only everyone needs to be in the room, but they need to be in the room since the very, very beginning in order to co-create what will then be implemented. And we're coming back to this topic of implementation and the shortcoming that it has been when it comes to this development of the different conservation models. That being said, I'm going to ask my question, and I'm sure that there will be very interesting answers. So, what single action would most accelerate effective multidimensional conservation between now and 2030? So in the next 5 years, if you had to think about one thing, one aspect, what would it be? Should we start with you?
If you must, it's very difficult to think of one because I can think of two that are struggling in my mind, But one would be, really to, and it's come out very clearly in all the interventions, to put sort of local communities and indigenous peoples at the center, because they have managed the lands, the ecosystems, and nothing can succeed if their interests, concerns, and rights are not taken into account, and indeed also their knowledge. But the second thing is, of course, resources and financing. I would leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's turn to the online panel. Yes, is Carolina still here? Yes, she is. Carolina, so turning to you, if there was one thing that you would like to highlight, what would it be?
Yeah, I would highlight that any and all actions that we apply in all of our conservation work in the territory, that these actions can allow the reshaping of the relationship between communities and wildlife from conflict to coexistence.
Thank you very much. Very powerful indeed. I'm not gonna stick to the classic order here. So turning to you now.
It's a tricky question, like changing my mind, I think 10 times in this last minute. But I go with something I said actually in another meeting. It's a concept we have here in the indigenous people here in Brazil. Usually they don't use the word influence. They use the word confluence, which is going together to a common goal, a common ground. We don't want to influence the other, just think like me. I want to give my experience and thoughts, listen to yours, and then confluence to a common ground. And that's, I think, the key for working together, multi-sector, and that's something that we can bring it strongly here from GlobalSouth and so on to bring it confluence and have this view of working together. And talking about work together, just to point out that we are here in Belém, which is a city that connects the forest and the sea. which is a really amazing, inspiring, iconic place for us for connecting with different areas and agendas as well, and confluence to a common ground.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. This idea of confluence really stands again to that point that things must be thought and shaped together. Turning to you.
I would say education, integrated education. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Larissa.
So Sandeep let me without words because he spoke my points. And just to give a bit of emphasis that I think it's common here that we need to institutionalize the co-design since the beginning. However, when we engage communities, we also need the power balance, and that has to do with financial support to the communities as well, to be recognized so they can have the confluence. And just because Jana just mentioned that we are here in this place from forest to the ocean, just a quick reminder that the ocean is also diversity, and here the ocean is brown and not blue.
Thank you very much, Francesca.
Gracias. Yo diría que una de las cosas es uno es la confianza.
So I would say that the first one is trust.
Y luego, diría yo, tal vez el conocimiento.
And then I would also say the
La
knowledge.
información, el tener la información, el conocimiento, el saber, el que tengamos buenas conexiones y de que la sociedad civil entienda también cuál es la problemática, que no se quede la ciencia como es. Ay, pero esas serían mis dos palabras.
Sí, entonces sería it would be the trust, sorry, but also the information and making sure that the knowledge is actually acquired by all and that people understand that knowledge, and that knowledge can be spread to all the communities, especially the civil society, and not that science remains in a silo of people that know about science. Who am I missing? I'm missing Cecile. And online, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry that I have to go. And I just want to add a last word. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, I can hear. We can hear you.
Like if we want to basically achieve the 30 by 30 meet of Ambition Paris Agreement, we need to definitely expand the protection into deeper zones of the ocean, like more than the shallow environments. Incorporate this as a climate refuge, strengthen definitely the co-management system that builds social and ecological resilience, which is already been demonstrated in many parts of the world. And the science is very clear. And with that, I'm leaving and saying goodbye. When ecosystems are healthy and the governance of those ecosystems are very strong, resilience can be very measurable and visible and definitely achievable. So I think those models can be replicated, and we have to work together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Good to see you guys.
Bye. Thank you very much, Alejandro, for being with us. Eduardo, since we're online, and then Cecile will have the word of closure, but please, if there was one thing that you would like to express, what would it be?
Yeah, from my side, I would like to follow up the ideas from Francisca. If I will have to pick one word, that would be biotechnology, because then we can build a future based on conservation and at the same time teaching to the local people how to protect and how to offer new insights into the science behind our conservation values, which are our endangered ecosystems.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Eduardo. Cecile?
From my point of view, I think that we need to foster multidisciplinary and multisectoral collaborations within the what we call the magic square. Does that mean that the best available science, but also the finance sector, both philanthropy and private sectors, the civil society, NGOs and civil society, and of course the government and institutions.
Thank you. So again, having all of these people in the same room and having these same conversation, we talked about trust, and actually trust in science has been at the heart of the Science for Action Climate Action Pavilion since the very beginning. We inaugurated the pavilion on this idea of trust in science, and it has to be at the heart of all the conversations that we'll be having within the next now week, because we've already had a week to go. I don't know if anyone has a question or if we can call it a wrap. Okay, then thank you very much for all that. Yes, we will take a small picture, but thank you, absolutely. Thank you for all of your inputs on this important conversation and topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Sure. Sorry, Carolina, Eduardo, can you stay for the picture? I don't know if you're seeing, but you're on the picture.
Yes, I'm here.
Me too. A ver si se tapa esa cuestión. Ahí. Eduardo, ¿dónde estás tú? Ah, en Antofagasta.
No, yo estoy en Alemania.
Estás en Alemania, donde hiciste tu doctorado, que decía en Cologne.
Sí, 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 vivo acá.
Thank you very much for everything. Bye bye.
Thank you everybody.